Hello, you malty. Miami malted Marielitos. Thank you to Salty Cuban, who's provided a malt mention for Ralphie Review 929 here in the Bothy. And I'm Ralphie, and I have been drinking whiskey for a long time. Not too much of it though. Otherwise I would have a very red nose and I would be a lot poorer. And I probably wouldn't be enjoying the actual slow sip and the subtleties and complexities of flavour that you get from slow sips of small and modest quantities without overdoing it. And you find that when you're drinking whiskey neat for flavour, you actually consume less because the alcohol's not lost in a carrier soft drink like lemonade, soda water, or even ice cubes, Coca-Cola, or ginger ale, or wherever. A gin and tonic, you can easily lose track of how much gin you're drinking because the tonic drowns it. With a whiskey and soda, you can easily lose track of the amount of, say, blended whiskey you're drinking because the soda, to a certain extent, drowns it and subdues its presence. But when you're sipping alcohol, it's different. And you're not going to pour a big glass of this because it's so flavour heavy that your palate soon gets overloaded. So you're talking small quantities. And that, by the way, if you're using a Glencairn glass, is a pretty decent measure. So you're putting about no more than about 2 centimetres into the bottom of the glass. That's a perfectly decent measure. 2 or 3 of these in an evening and you're done. You're not a heavy drinker, you're a modest drinker. And therefore you're not so prone to the long-term health problems, risks and unfortunate circumstances that can arise from drinking too much alcohol. And just look around you at the people who do drink too much alcohol and the state of their health. It's a wake-up call, a reminder. This is why we go for quality and not quantity. And this is why we are confident that when we spend extra money and buy a decent bottle of whiskey or any other spirit, bourbon, rye, rum, cognac, we can keep these bottles with us for years, literally years. There is no rush to finish the bottle in order to go out and buy another. So I've already poured a glass of this. It's Glenallachie. It's 13 years old. It's bottled at 48%. It's finished, as the majority of contemporary Glenallachies are, in a Madeira cask. I like Madeira casks. Madeira casks, you very, very rarely get any that are sulphury or stale or sour. That's my experience with Madeira casks. Madeira casks work wonderfully well with whiskey and wonderfully well with rum, and if they were used in bourbon, they would work wonderfully well with bourbon as well. In fact, I'm surprised many bourbon makers don't use secondary maturation and basically rebadge their bourbon as another form of whiskey. It's a plan. People are more open-minded these days, and this is why there's an acceptance for finishes in casks. People may not necessarily quite understand why it's done. It's done for several reasons. And I'll just touch on that briefly, in that many years ago I went into Cadenhead's, the independent bottlers, and I bought a bottle of Glenallachie. It was 17 or 18-year-old Glenallachie, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But it was a fairly generic Speyside whiskey, which was pleasant and fresh and fruity, but you weren't really going to remember it much. And if that whiskey had been finished in a good quality, say, sherry cask, and left in the bottle for a little while just to help marry it up, it would have been a whole different experience. And this is something that's always been done in the whiskey industry, but they just never talked about it in the old days. what they would do is they put their whisky into fresh casks that had just been brought into the distillery to tone the casks down by putting the whisky in for 6 months, 3 months, 6 months or a year, just to kind of elevate the volume of flavour in the whisky. And then they'd decant it back into a standard cask, and they'd have a signature cask ready. Now, signature cask is if you're in, say, Glenallachie Distillery and you have tamed a fresh cask with your own whisky, your Glenallachie whisky, as soon as you put another Glenallachie into that cask that's been toned down for full maturation of 10 years, you know, the signature's clean. It's not getting kind of hazy and mixed up with the signatures of other Scotch single malt distilleries. And you may notice that some odd independent bottlings of Caol Ila, for example, the very reason they're odd is because they've been matured in ex-Ardbeg casks or ex-Laphroaig casks or even ex-Bowmore casks. And so you get two different strongly flavoured whiskies coming together and they create something different. And with cask finishing, you can create something different. So rather than your one standard signature coming from a distillery at different ages, if you cask finish, bringing in new casks, wet casks, just recently been emptied, good quality wood, and without rinsing them out, you basically just check they're empty, and then you fill with your new make spirit, or with spirit which has already been maturing in another cask for 8, 9, 10 or whatever, how many years, then you can actually send that signature in different direction. You can put it in the bourbon direction, the port direction, the Madeira direction, the Masala direction, the cognac direction, the rum direction. So in fact, within one distillery, you start to get different styles of signature. And this creates variety in the marketplace. So someone who's a big fan of, say, Glenallachie will say, well, I don't want to just have the sherry cask matured, I want the Madeira cask matured and the bourbon cask matured, so I can see the difference between the three of them. And at the same time, because the distillery has committed and invested into buying in these new casks and priming them by using them for finishing existing distillery matured spirit, they are setting up the absolute perfect cask portfolio for the next generation of what they produce at the distillery. My opinion is, and it's just an opinion, only an opinion, that Glenallachie is going to greatly increase its reputation in the future once it starts releasing its own made spirit from the current owner out in these primed casks, which will be less assertive and more balanced, more traditional in style, and they'll still have all the permutations and varieties of house style from all the different style of casks they're using. Anyway, how about this whisky? Because I'm getting a little bit digressed there on the culture of cask finishes. It's never been more popular and transparent than it is now. Many cask finishes work, some don't. It depends on the quality of the cask. Just to remind you, it's all about the quality of the cask, the quality of the wood, the length of time the cask's been sitting after being emptied, the integrity of that cask, the physical structure of that cask, whether it's going to leak or not. There's all these permutations. If it was easy, everybody would make whisky, but it's not. Making good whisky is a very real skill, and you can't learn it. It's like painting or music. You need to have an aptitude and an instinct and a talent for it to really do it properly. Because it's not just about joining the dots and twiddling the dials on your computers on your remote control. It's about actually nosing, tasting, developing and understanding the signature of your particular single malt identity. With Glenallachie at the moment, a little bit fudged because they're using old stock from previous owner. The previous owner was creating that for blends rather than as single malts. So I anticipate that the standard of single malt from Glenallachie is going to be improving quite significantly over the next few years. In the meantime, on the nose with this Madeira matured, it's unchill filtered and natural colour, but it doesn't say it in the label, but it says it in the box. But hey, it's the bottle sitting in the barrel, not a bottle in the box. So there we go. That should be on the label. It really should. And the difference between chill filtered whisky and unchill filtered whisky, quite simply, doesn't matter what people tell you, malt mates. It doesn't matter the propaganda that you get out the whisky industry from some sources. It's very easy to tell if a whisky has been unchill filtered or has been chill filtered. And that is, you put some water into it to cut it down to about 40%, slightly lower, and if it's a warm day, put the glass in the fridge for half an hour, and if there's any mist, right, in the whisky, it means there are barley oils, there are long chain proteins, there are fatty esters in the liquor, which means it's not chill filtered. Because you can get basic filtering, you can get barrier filtering, you can get ambient temperature filtering, you can get soft filtering, you can get hard filtering, and then you get the dreaded chill filtering, so that no matter what, that whisky will be as clear as glass, clear and cosmetified, because flavour's been stripped out of it, form's been stripped out of it, and it's been diminished. But hey, it's what the consumers want, those that don't have experience in whisky. Nose. Raisiny malt. Not sweet. Good raisins. This is a clean Madeira cask, well sourced. If I was to hazard a guess, I would say the Madeira that I'm nosing off the top of this whisky is Henrik and Henrik. Madeira is a delightful mountainous little island with some fabulous botanic gardens in it. It's out in the Atlantic. It's wonderfully diverse. It's very eccentric, and they produce this particularly fortified wine, which is like port but different. And the more time Madeira spends in the cask, the better it gets. It's amazingly tough as a fortified wine. But having said that, see, getting good Madeira these days is rather hard to do. Old Madeiras are shockingly expensive for what they are, and the worst place to be paying for them is in fact in Madeira itself. They do know how to charge. This doesn't really work until you leave the whisky in the glass for about an hour, because the finish utterly dominates. Most finishes dominate. You can't just pour and go. Otherwise you're just going to get the cask flavour rather than the balance of cask and spirit. You've got to treat finished whiskies like old whiskies. Add a bit less water and give it a lot more time before you can access the full event and realise the bliss point of the experience. Taste. Sharp, tangy, semi-sweet, resinous. I like that resinous. Some lovely raisin and almost wood resin notes. Sign of a good cask. If it had been a sherry cask, you'd have a sherry overcoat on the whisky. But with Madeira, you don't get that overcoat so much, because somehow it seems to fit in, dovetail in with the Scotch whisky itself, rather more successfully than Oloroso or particularly PX sherry. I've added a drop of water. How much? Just short of a teaspoon, 4 millilitres. I would give it a lot more time than this, but hey, I've got a whisky review to get on with, so let's get stuck in again. On the nose, Now we're getting there. The whisky signature's coming through. It's light, because Glenallachie is light. It's a light Speyside. In fact, in many ways, it's rather like Glenmorangie, but a little bit more sort of gummy, a little bit more sultanity in the signature. But you're talking light fruits, white fruits, talking a little bit of, oh, excuse me, here he comes. Where's it? You coming up? You coming up, Fluffy? No. Well, go away then, because I'm doing a whisky review. You do this every time. You come in, give a meow, don't show your face, and then head off again. I think you're winding me up. One of the cats. I'd lift them up and all the rest of it, but they're getting more struggly because they're just winding me up. And I don't want them knocking a glass or a bottle off the barrel. It's not worth the risk. Glenallachie Madeira cask matured. Finished. The fresh fruit is really quite engaging, and it's not swamped as it would be with a sherry cask or even a fresh bourbon cask. You don't have this dominance of vanilla notes. Madeira cask, it's just more subtle. It's just more blended in. Light fruit, pear, mild banana, touch of mango, sultana raisin, soft raisins, not rich raisin flavour, subtle raisin flavour. A little bit of peel, like dried peel in there, lemon, lime. It doesn't have a long length to it actually. It's a 13-year-old whisky. Without doubt, a lot of flavour is coming from that Madeira cask. A lot. The single malt behind it is relatively light, it's soft. In a sense, it's allowing the cask to dominate to a certain extent. Given more time, it will rebalance. But the very relatively light wood influence is coming from that Madeira cask, not from the previous casks used to mature this batch of Glenallachie. The previous casks have been very light in their interaction. In fact, they've been slightly underwhelming, and it just shows. You can taste it. In case you're wondering, all these complex tasting notes and all the rest of it, it comes with experience. You can't rush it. Some people are very talented with their senses and can pick it up in a couple of years, 3, 4, 5 years. But I mean, I've been at this for 30 years and I've got very average senses. They're nothing special. I'd never make it as a master blender. No chance. And I wouldn't want the job because it would just be incredibly repetitious. And then there's the brand ambassadoring side of it, and I just couldn't go through all that. I just couldn't deal with it. Some lovely Scotch mist appearing in this glass now. I don't know if you can see it. When you see that Scotch mist, when you see that Highland mist, or the Island mist, or whatever mist it is, that is the original sign that a whisky's not been chill filtered. That is the definitive sign. Doesn't matter what anybody tells you, bear in mind they could be bullshitting. Now it's coming out now. Getting more expressive. Gingery notes. Some green fruit. A little bit of papaya in the background. A little bit of sour kiwi fruit. The sensations are now growing. Interesting little range of sensation. Pickled ginger. Soft mint notes. Now, at long last, I mean, this is one reason why my reviews can be relatively long at times. Not always, but at times can go on a bit. Because you can't just explain a whisky away in 5 minutes. You cannot do it. You cannot let people understand the complexities of whisky without background and conversations that relate to that whisky that are not specifically about smell and taste. You can't rattle off half a dozen just notes from the script handed over from a distillery's tasting note pack. It doesn't work, because that doesn't tell you half of what's going on. And importantly, it doesn't tell you what your palate's experiencing. Because our palates differ. We're all different. Our palates are different. What am I going to give this for a malt mark? To start with, I'd have given it about 82 if I'd been rushing in. But giving that malt time, and I want to emphasise this, give it time. Too many people are too quick with their whiskies. You really notice this at whisky festivals. They make out, because they're going through the performance, and I don't mean to be critical, but hey ho, it's what you get. People go through the nose, 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 yap, 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 taste, taste, oh yeah, this is this and this is that. No. You cannot have a whisky in less than 5 minutes and expect to know what it's all about. It doesn't work that way. You're getting experience shorthand and abbreviated. 85, it's an integrity malt mark for Glenallachie. Madeira cask matured 13-year-old single malt. This is one that I'm going to have around for a long, long time. And as the time goes by and as the bottle gets a little more air into it, this whisky's just going to get better and better as the malt exerts itself a little more and that finish starts to break down due to oxidisation just a little bit more and it becomes more rounded. I'm Ralphie, hope you've enjoyed this. Click likey, subscribey and all the nice things. We'll see you soon for Ralphie Review 929, in which I will be talking about accessing your whisky. I've covered this before, but I want to cover it again because it's very, very important. And even people who regard themselves as experienced are not giving whisky enough time in the glass. It happens.